Welcome back to Creation Magazine Live. And in this segment, what are we going to be talking about?
We are going to be talking about ATP synthase.
Awesome.
This is
nobody knows what that is yet, but it is awesome.
Here, technical article. It says at the top. So this is it's not too bad. We'll walk through it and we'll try and get the pronunciations right of some of these things.
Actually, this is absolutely amazing.
It's absolutely amazing. This is out of volume 31, number 4. Volume 31, number 4 of Creation Magazine.
So what's ATP synthase? Lay it on us.
Brian Thomas is the author. All right. Life depends on an incredible enzyme called ATP synthase, the world's tiniest rotary motor. This tiny protein complex makes an energy-rich compound, ATP, and the ATP synthase is what makes the ATP. Right. ATP, let me see if I can get this. Adenosine triphosphate, ATP. We'll just use ATP. ATP. Each of the human body's 14 trillion cells performs this reaction about 1 million times per minute. Let's do the math on that one.
A lot of stuff going on.
Over half a body weight of ATP is made and consumed every day. All living things need ATP, often called the energy currency of life. ATP is a small molecule with a big job: to provide immediately usable energy for cellular machines. ATP-driven protein machines power almost everything that goes on inside living cells, including manufacturing DNA, RNA, and proteins, cleanup of debris, and transporting chemicals into and out of or within the cells. Other fuel sources will not power these cellular protein machines for the same reasons that oil, wind, and sunlight won't power a gasoline engine. Logical thinking about an automobile engine leads us to think that only a clever person with a mind and a will could make a machine that converts energy from one form to another for the purpose of moving a car. The machine shows orderly, non-random proportions and clever use of interdependent parts that are the right size, shape, and strength to work together for an overall purpose. The same inference from a machine back to a maker is The same inference, let's start that again. The same inference from machine back to maker is validly inferred from machines found in nature back to their creator. Thank you very much. Everyone knows that painting comes from a painter, because painting shows specified complexity or a complex and recognizable pattern that is not the property of the paint. That is, the paint molecules do not spontaneously organize themselves into a portrait of the Mona Lisa, for example. Right. ATP synthase occurs on the inner membranes of bacterial cells and the innermost membranes of both mitochondrial and chloroplasts, which are membrane-bound structures inside animal and plant cells. See Figure 1. Now, there's a bunch of figures here, but we've got something better. We'll show you an animation of how this works.
Now, so far we've got every living thing has a motor. It produces a compound called ATP, and if you don't have ATP, you're not alive.
You're dead.
So no motor, no life.
Right.
Okay.
You have to have this motor to produce this stuff. ATP synthase manufactures ATP from two smaller chemicals, ADP and phosphate. ATP synthase is so small that it is able to manipulate both these tiny molecules one at a time. ATP synthase must convert some other form of energy into new ATPs. This energy is in the form of a hydrogen ion gradient, which is generated by a different whole protein system to ATP synthase. Hydrogen ions pour through ATP synthase like wind through a windmill. This comprises a positively charged electrical current, in contrast to our electric motors, which use a negative current of electrons. ATP synthase is a complex engine and pictures are necessary to describe it, or this animation that you're about to see.
Right.
Scientists use clever techniques to resolve the exact locations of each of the many thousands of atoms that comprise large molecules like ATP synthase. This protein complex contains at least 29 separately manufactured subunits that fit together into two main portions, the head and the base. The base is anchored to a flat membrane, like a button on a shirt, and except that buttons are fixed in one place, whereas ATP synthase can migrate anywhere on the plane of its membrane, so it can move around.
The motor can move.
The motor can move. The head of ATP synthase forms a tube. It comprises 6 units in 3 pairs. These form 3 sets of docking stations, each one which will hold 1 ADP and phosphate. ATP synthase includes a stator, a stationary part, which arcs around the outside of the structure to help anchor the head to its base. Now we can look at something amazing. The efficient way that this marvelous micro machine works. Notice, now it's saying in figure 1 here, but you can see the animation. Here's where the magic happens. When a stream of tiny hydrogen atoms, or protons, flows through the base and out the side of the ATP synthase, passing across the membrane, they force the axle and base to spin. The stiff central axle pushes against the inside walls of the 6 head proteins, which become slightly deformed and reformed alternatively. Each of your trillions of cells has many thousands of these machines spinning at over 9,000 RPM. The spinning axle causes squeezing motions of the head so as to align ADP next to phosphate, forming ATP in bucket loads. Many other cellular protein machines use ATP, breaking it down to ADP and phosphate again. This is then recycled back into ATP by the ATP synthase. Lubert Stryker, author of Biochemistry, adds, the enzyme appears to operate near 100% efficiency. So, and the article goes on here, and you can see the animation. It's remarkable how this works. So here's a motor inside your cells, and without it, life would be impossible.
Right, which indicates that, as far as we can tell, even the simplest life form on the planet has ATP.
Right.
With that, we can actually make that observation. So, then if you want to think about it, we have no other working model but to think that these motors must have been there if you want to believe in evolution, that motor must have evolved in order to even get life to occur. You can say, well, it might have been simpler in the past, but we have no working samples to work with that.
That is complete. You can say that.
But it's all faith.
Nonsensical.
It's complete faith at that point because you have no way to know that. You've got nothing to study.
All of the components need to be there. All of those complex components that the article mentions here, and you can see in the animation. All of that needs to be there at once. The point of all of these little mechanisms in the ATP synthase is to synthesize ATP.
Which is the universal life currency. And then he's saying that when the things use it, it breaks it back down into phosphate and ADP again, and then that gets reused. So that's why it's almost 100% efficient.
Yep.
It's just incredible. And the size we're talking about here of these motors, it's 20 nanometers in size. So if you took a meter and you cut it up into 1 billion pieces, right? Imagine, and you took 20 of those billion pieces. That's the size we're talking about here. Micro machinery at an incredible level. So, just amazing what they're finding inside so-called simple things.
And to say that all of that evolved again is just as you already hinted, it takes an incredible amount of faith to believe that could evolve through whatever mechanism you want to imagine.
That's right.
Like, it's difficult to even imagine a step-by-step process or any process that could produce that kind of a mini machine.
Even atheists like Antony Flew, who for years was the highest level atheist on the planet, once he was exposed to information like this, he actually became a theist anyway, believing there's a God. If you'd like to see some more information on ATP synthase, visit creation.com.
This animated sequence shows the ATP synthase enzyme in operation. The animation is based on an incredible series of scientific discoveries. Only the colors show artistic license. ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is the energy currency of the cell. ATP is produced by a tiny molecular rotary motor, rotating at up to 7,000 RPM. These are so small that 100,000 would fit side by side in a millimeter. A current of protons drives the motor, unlike man-made electric motors which use electrons. This portion of the enzyme is where adenosine diphosphate is combined with a phosphate ion in the presence of a catalyst to produce ATP, which is then released, making way for the next cycle. A top view of the enzyme shows the sequential operation. Almost every biochemical process in your body requires ATP. Such a nanomachine exhibits all the characteristics of super-intelligent design. ATP is vital for life, and many of these motors were needed before the first living cell could exist. An evolutionary impossibility.